Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. What's going on, my friend? By the way, I am getting a little bit better at that portion. I haven't screwed that up in quite a bit.
Hey, it's a little difficult thing to do when you're speaking that fast, introducing, so you can't discount that. But no, you're killing it, buddy.
Appreciate it, dude.
But no, I'm doing good, and I mean, with how the Flyers are playing, even better. Obviously, a 3-game winning streak here. They're 7-1-2 in their last 10 games. Crazy enough, the Flyers obviously lose to the San Jose Sharks on November 7th. And since that point, they're 13-3-2 in the last 18 games. So that kind of just shows, obviously, how good that they're playing right now. And that's the best record in the league since that point and since that date of November 7th. So the Flyers are rolling, and there's going to be a lot, obviously, for us to talk about and get into just due to that. How you doing, my friend?
Opening up with fire.
Yeah,
I love
always.
that, Vasili. Don't let anybody forget that. And I love that you bring up that San Jose thing, because it's like that moment where everybody was freaking out about the season, and it just shows the
Went the complete opposite way that everybody thought it was going to go, right?
I mean, you rarely see us freak out about a loss on here.
Yeah.
And I didn't freak out about that loss. I was kind of like, yeah, that shit happens.
Well, they were playing pretty decently before that. And I mean, in hockey, one loss doesn't mean everything. And I mean, ultimately, the team responded really well. And if you think about it, losing to, at that point, the worst team in the league and haven't even won a game, that probably put a little chip on the team's shoulder to say, hey, this isn't going to happen again, right?
Yeah, and I don't know the Sharks' record. I didn't look this up, but I would imagine their record since that point, since they beat us, is probably much better than it was prior. Like, they're definitely not not winning any games anymore, So that their season also somewhat turned around. If they didn't start off so freaking horribly, they probably wouldn't be by far the worst team in the league. They just had a horrible start.
Yeah, they're last in the league right now, 9-20-3. But I mean, Chicago's 10-20-1, so it's like them two essentially.
Well, if you think about that, they didn't win the first 10 games in a
which
row.
is crazy. So they're
really, about 500 since then. They're a little under, which is not by far the worst team in the league. It's just a terrible start. They got a talking to and then turned it around. And again, they're still not a good team, but they're not like a team that can't win a game. That's like a complete fallacy. All right. Before we get started, just want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, do all the usual stuff for us. Again, it's tremendously helpful to us. Like, follow us on Spotify and iTunes, give us a rating on iTunes. All that stuff is immensely helpful. You guys are supporting us. Our numbers have definitely gone back up, especially since Steve has come on. I got an announcement about that in a minute here. But again, reminder to do that. We really, really appreciate it. You guys are awesome.
And just to slip into, anybody who has questions on Twitter, even in the YouTube, if you want anything answered, feel free to add us. We'll bring it up on the show and get into a conversation.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. If somebody wants something brought up on the show, ask us. Literally just ask us to bring it up on the show and we can do it. We're always looking for topics, so can't hurt. And a reminder for our sponsor, Jim Steaks, 4th and South. I don't believe they're still open. I forgot to look it up, but again, you can get them up on DoorDash and support them through there. Don't forget about Jim Steaks. They will be back soon. All right, let's get into it. The first thing, before we get into full hockey talk, I want to make an announcement on here. I haven't announced it yet on Twitter, but this is kind of a big deal. And I want to announce in the beginning of the show, because from what we can tell by the numbers, this is something people definitely interested in. I mean, we see the numbers skyrocket when Steve is on, Steve Kornianos, the draft analyst, and we are obviously took notice of that. And we love Steve, and I met Steve a few years ago, and Steve loves Vasili, and we obviously have a great relationship with him. And I, after our last episode, asked Steve if he wanted to be part of the FNG family. And we have now agreed on a partnership with the draft analyst. So what that means exactly is not that he's going to be on this show every week or anything like that. Again, he's got his own kind of site to write for, his own blog that he does and all of the coverage he does. But he is now officially our prospect guy, which is amazing to say. I love Steve, and he is amazing at what he does, and he's got a fantastic personality. And I'm so happy I made friends with him, and that you made friends with him, Vasili. And so what that will entail is that we're going to start having him on every other month just for prospect updates because we don't need one every week or anything like that. But we're going to do full on Flyers prospect updates every other month. The next one is scheduled for the end of January, and we'll have him on then. And we'll constantly do prospect updates. Then, as we get closer to the draft, we will have him on probably maybe once a month, maybe even twice a month. But we're going to do constant updates, and we're going to have Steve on a lot more as we get closer to when the prospects are important. And then, obviously, in the off season, we'll have a lot more roundups. So we're going to have a lot more of him on the podcast and part of the group. Again, he's amazing. Please make sure to follow him and support what he does as well, just for the draft analyst, because he absolutely deserves it. And yeah, that's you guys. And we let him know the response to him every single time. Our highest listened to episodes are all with Steve. And yeah, we're super excited about it because we love Steve, and this legitimizes us in the prospect department because Vasily and I watch some stuff. We're following the team to some degree, but we're nowhere near on his level
Oh,
as
definitely not.
paying attention to prospects. I haven't met many people, quite frankly, like Steve. I would say he's in the 1% of that
Yeah,
category.
well, this is just a really exciting partnership, and like you said, we love Steve, great guy, great person in general. So we're just excited to be able to do more content with him, and obviously, just in terms of the information he brings, right, in terms of insight and just all the analysis on the prospects, I would say the best in all of hockey, in my
Yeah.
opinion, just the deep
Oh yeah.
dives that he does. So, to get him on the show more often, it's going to be great, and we're going to keep bringing you guys the great prospect analysis and content coming up. So.
Yeah, and with that, hopefully, and again, he has to pay attention to a lot of players, but we'll get even a little bit extra attention on Flyers stuff because he knows he's going to be coming, back up here. So we'll get kind of really good updates that maybe in the past he wouldn't have paid attention to those guys as much just because he was focused on other guys. But obviously, he'll be here for the whole Matvey Michkov uh, journey, and we got the World Junior Championships coming up, and Bonk and Gautier and Ciernik will all be playing big roles for their team. So we'll get updates on that stuff. So I'm super excited about it. And it's a big moment because I've been wanting to ask him about that for a while. And I felt like it was the right time. And I'm so happy he was receptive to it. He was like super, he was just like, yeah, let's do it. And I was
Yeah,
like,
it's awesome.
yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. So yeah, well, again, we'll announce it online. I'm kind of lollygagging a little bit with that, but I'll make an official announcement online. I let Jamie know too, and he's super excited, and it's just awesome. All right, the other thing I want to talk about, and I just want to give a shout out to Misty Love. Again, Vasily is in Toronto, so he was not able to attend. Otherwise, it would take him 10 hours to get
I was
there.
there in spirit, though. There
Yeah.
you go.
But we were invited, myself, Jamie, and Rob. If you guys don't know Rob Winfeld, he writes for us as well here out of Philadelphia. Um, we were invited to speak at the Flyers fan club. This what was it? What's today?
Tuesday?
Wednesday. Yes, Tuesday. Thank you. Tuesday the 19th. When the Flyers were playing against the Devils, and we came in Wells Fargo Center. We're in like the downstairs bar eating area, which I've actually never been to before. Might have been an employee spot. I'm not sure, but it was really great. We got to hang out with a bunch of diehard Flyers fans. People have been in this group for probably like 30 years. And they're all just a tight knit community of awesome, really nice people who are obsessed with the Flyers. They did a Pollyanna. They had a bunch of free food, and we did. We were kind of special guests. I don't want to say we're special, but we did answer some questions. We did a talk before the game, and just had a opportunity to chat with people and just get to know them. And it was really great event, and that's through Jamie. Jamie built a relationship with Misty, and Misty's really great. She's really nice, and she's obsessed with the Flyers. Favorite player, Carter, Sean Couturier, and she has a fantasy team called Coots. There it is.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, so she loves Sean Couturier. So give a shout out to Misty Love. Find her online, say hi to her, and consider joining the Flyers fan club because it was really great, and I think that'd be cool if that group grew even larger because the team's about to be a lot more relevant, especially when Mitchkov gets here. And I almost guarantee that. And I want, you know what? I'm going to add Mitchkov here because I want to talk about Kucherov today too. And we don't have him on here, but we'll end on that.
Sure, let's do it. I mean, it seems to be a constant theme, so that's fine.
Yeah, I can't stop talking about the kid. I mean,
Why? I mean, why not, right? What's there not to like? So obviously a lot to discuss in terms of the talent.
yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. Anything you want to say about the Flyers fan club there?
No, just obviously great group of people. I wish I could have made it to the event, but
Would have been cool to have you.
everybody, try to join up, and I expect it to get even bigger as the team gets better, right? It's just the nature of how things like that work. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was an honor. Honestly, it's so nice. Okay, let's move into our topics. So again, we're not doing really game recaps anymore. They're a little bit boring, so we're just going to do general topics. But the Flyers do have 3 wins here in a row since we last spoke. They beat the Capitals in a close game 4-3. They beat the Red Wings in a close game 1-0, and they beat the Devils in a close game 3-2. With that beautiful goal by Owen Tippett in overtime, which we'll talk about Tippett in his own topic there. But I love the way the Flyers are playing again. People keep waiting for for things to fall off the rails. But the Flyers continue to bring a consistent performance every night, even if they're not playing their best hockey that you've seen that night. The structure never fails. The aggression never fails. The battle never fails. And even games where you think, oh man, they could have lost that one or something, they're not losing it. And they're winning again with what Vasili and I talked about in the preseason, constantly through team defense, led by their defensive centers, by their defensive priority and their mindset. And again, and we'll talk about the goalies, but the best goaltender combination, it's not that crazy to say in franchise history. Like the Flyers have had other great goalies, Pelle Lindbergh, Bernie Perrant, who were the backups.
yeah.
It's not often that the Flyers have had this level of caliber at this young of age. And we're not even talking about the prospects below them. This is a level of goaltending riches that I'll be honest, I don't think there's a team in the league that has better than us. I don't care what other people are saying. I've never seen anything like this. There are people still who think that Carter Hart needs to prove that he's great. He's already great. If you watch Carter Hart play, he's great. It's not a question. You got anything to say about those 3 wins? And then we can get into there are individual topics.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those 3 wins, obviously, to get 3 in a row there after that heartbreaking loss against Nashville in overtime. I mean, it does show character, right? Like that's a tough loss to take, and then you have to travel back home. And that Washington game, I mean, that they won in the shootout, and once again, 3 for 3 in the shootout this season, and Urson's won all their shootouts, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, that Washington game could have been a trap game for them, just coming off a tough performance and a tough loss, and they're able to rebound and sneak the win out, despite the fact that Washington did have the lead at certain points in the game there. But just in general, right? Like they're on a 9-game point streak. Over the last 9 games, they have points in all of those games, so that just kind of shows how consistent they've been. In terms of the goaltending, right? Like I think you are correct, Yariv. Like it's just an abundance of riches there. Like obviously Carter Hart hasn't played since the Flyers beat the Avalanche, which has been a while now, but he's still on the season 9-6-1. Tied for 6th with 2.42 goals against per game played in the league. Tied for 8th with 9.19 save percentage. So that just shows obviously how well he's been playing. He's in the top 10 and 2 of the most traditionally looked at goaltending stats in the league, which was not the case previously. And that's obviously due to the Flyers just playing better as a team in general. And then now, even though Urson started off with some struggles here. His last 10 appearances, he's 8-1-1, has a 929 save percentage and plus 11.11 goals save above expected. So I'm not sure where that ranks amongst the league, but I mean, in that time period, if you look at Carter Hart's 919 tied 8th and he's 929 in his last 10, like, I mean, it's probably in the upper echelon, obviously, of goaltenders in the league. Yeah. So both of them are playing really well, but like you said, I mean, the really big part of it all, obviously, is the defensive play and just how they've been doing in their own end. So far this season, the Flyers have only allowed 81 goals against in 31 games played. That places them tied for seventh in the NHL with the New York Rangers for fewest goals allowed in the league. So once again, that's top 10 in one of the biggest defensive metrics league wide. And then along with that, the Flyers allow 2.61 goals against per game, and that's tied for sixth lowest in the NHL with the Vegas Golden Knights. So not only are they top 10 in overall goals against allowed and goals against per game, they're up there with the Rangers, who are tops in the Metro Division, up there with the Vegas Golden Knights, who are, the former Stanley Cup champs from last season. And in a season where no media pundits really expected the Flyers to be this good, their defensive stinginess has really been big key to their success here. And it continues, and the consistency continues. And one final thing I wanted to mention, and the Flyers actually set this record, but on the road, I believe it was their 13th game in a row after the win against the Devils. They've allowed either 3 or fewer goals on the road, and that beats the Stanley Cup winning team of 1973-74.
Crazy.
So it's pretty nuts to think that they're beating, a Stanley Cup winning team in terms of that metric of, allowing 3 or fewer goals against on the road in the last 13 games. But the team, is playing a defense by committee style, and they've really bought in to the system that Tortorella and Bradshaw are employing, not only in their defensive zone, but also the neutral zone, and just really throughout. And the forwards are really doing a great job of back checking and supporting their defensemen that are, playing an aggressive style. And that can be hard to do sometimes, right? Like if you're not playing for each other and you're playing in that manner where your defense is pinching up and you don't have forwards covering for them, it can go real bad really quickly. So the Flyers have shown to be able to support one another on the ice more often than not this season, and that consistency defensively and their commitment to defense as a team has really, put them in the position that they're in, where they're, firmly in second place right now in the Metropolitan Division here.
Yeah, yeah, and it's when you read those numbers out loud, it's like, look, none of us predicted this level of success.
No, we thought they were going to be a bubble team, right? And they've surpassed our expectations in terms of what's happening right
and
now.
look, maybe it'll level out. Maybe they will end up being a bubble team. But the fact that they've even been able to achieve this through 31 games of the season, that has definitely exceeded people's expectations. I mean, what are they? 18, 10, and 3 or something like that? Is that their record? I'm pretty sure.
I believe so,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that's the record. And
yeah, 18, 10, and 3, 39 points.
With a bottom 3 power play. So, you can't even say that they're scoring themselves out of mistakes, right? Like, this is a team that's playing great hockey. And I do want to talk about the power play specifically. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but it is very exciting to see that the fundamentals are there. And this is the exact environment that you want young players to grow up in. This is how the Boston Bruins built. We talked about it for 2 years already. This is how the Bruins got to the point that the Bruins are in today.
Yeah,
where they're constantly good, regardless of who they put in the lineup. Nick Steeler, anyone?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's also the fact that they're playing in games that matter. Like if you're completely out of it and the games don't matter,
So
how is it hard to how are you going to get players to buy into your system or really evaluate what you have, because there's nothing on the line, there's no stakes here. So the Flyers are firmly in a playoff race, and it looks like they're going to be till the end of the season. I think on the broadcast last night they brought up a stat saying that by the holiday break, like 84% of teams that are in the playoffs typically make it to the postseason. So that's a really good, odds percentage for the Flyers. Obviously, we'll see if they can keep it up here. But I mean, they're 7-1-2 in their last 10, as I mentioned off the top. So the consistency, hasn't been an issue. But I think too, one thing to point out is just the amount of one goal games that they've kind of been in of late, right? Like against the Devils, 3-2 game, Red Wings, 1-0 game, Capitals, 4-3 game, Predators, 3-2 game, Coyotes game and the Avalanche game were, kind of blowouts. But then the two Penguins games are 1-goal games. And that Devils game on November 30th, also a 1-goal game. So pretty much out of their last, let's see here, out of their last 11, only 2 games have not been 1-goal games. So it
That's
just
because of the
shows.
power play.
Well, yeah, 100%. The power play hasn't
Yeah,
helped them out, but I mean, it just shows that the team's learning to play in these tight situations, in these tight circumstances, and that's what playoff hockey is
dude,
essentially like. So it's a
100%.
it's a really good thing for the younger guys to be playing in these tight games, and learning how to win in these situations. Because if you're not in them, how are you going to effectively grasp what you need to do, right? So yeah, they're learning how to win, and they're learning how to win in tight games, and that can only be a good thing for young players developing in this league and understanding what it takes to have an effect, have an impact, and what you need to do, to ultimately, win games consistently at the NHL level. So
Yeah, 100%, man. I think that was very well said, and you nailed it. And actually, that rolls right into our next to our topic, which Owen Tippett's overtime winner. I mean, you talk about a tight game, game where New Jersey is obvious. Look, they've lost to us a few times already this season. They want to win, right? They were pushing as hard as they could in the third period. There's a reason they outshot the Flyers. They were pushing hard. They were playing very aggressive hockey. They had the Flyers on their toes for a good chunk of that third period, and the Flyers felt it. And even in overtime, right? Jack Hughes, that's his bread and butter, right? Like, and that kid's amazing. I love Jack Hughes, just to make that clear. He's one of my favorite players in the league.
yeah, really good.
But again, look who scores that goal in overtime. Owen Tippett with the aggressive poke check. Again, he was flying. He almost scored before that too. And it's in those tight moments where you have to play well and be aggressive, and he has nobody really there to help him, and he has to just get creative. And, not only does he strip the puck from essentially two guys, right? He disrupts the play between two guys, strips
Both
the
the Hughes
puck.
brothers, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, top. I think that's actually a great point. Top players on the opposition's team, strips them of the puck, and then just rips it top shelf. Like, this sport is about, all sports are confidence driven. And you talk about building confidence and knowing that, your push and what you're doing, the little things that you're doing are getting you places. It incentivizes you to keep doing them. And, Owen Tippett scored a star like goal the other night. Like, take over the game, give me that puck, and I'm going to roof it. And, we can talk a lot. I don't have Ryan Paling on here, but, Paling's game also, right? Like, he had a big game. He's
Yeah.
not old. The guy's 24, 25, right? I think he just turned 25 years old. Like,
Yes.
these are not like 10-year veterans in the league. These are guys who are still on their journey to becoming what they are. And that's why I want to talk about Kucherov there at the end with Michkov. And uh, that's just a humongous moment. And seeing Tippett score that goal, and it was such a nasty shot to top. Like, that was like, I'm a star player, feel my fucking wrath. Excuse my cursing, but like, he just
Yeah.
laid into
The
it.
release, the release there is crazy. I think for Tippett too, like, the last goal he scored was against Washington, on the Thursday, and that was a tying goal. So he's
That was a big
scoring,
goal.
big goals at big moments, right? And that's obviously only going to add to your confidence. And
Yep.
Tortorella is putting him out in the overtimes. Is trusting him in these big moments, and he's coming through. And I think it's even more worth noting that he strips both the Hughes brothers there, two guys that have played together essentially their whole life. So the chemistry obviously, is really good between them both. They're essentially kind of know where each other are going to be on the ice, and he's kind of able to get in between that. That just shows the anticipation on his end is, really good, really great hockey IQ to kind of intercept that and then go and create that breakaway chance for himself. But like you said, like, the release is, perfect, right? He has the velocity behind the shot, but then the accuracy as well to put it top shelf. And like you said, right, he had some chances throughout the whole game. He had 6 shots on net in this game, so that just shows kind of how much he was buzzing throughout the entirety of it. To have 6 shots on goal, you're obviously using your speed to open up lanes. Shooting lanes effectively for yourself. And he did have a breakaway chance earlier. In the game where Bobby Brink sprung him off a nice turnover or a nice strip that was also on Jack Hughes, funny enough. And he wasn't able to score on that one, but he kind of tries a bit of a different move where he doesn't deke on the breakaway, but goes for the shot. So it kind of shows a learning progress there as well to, change the move up on the breakaway and then get the winner. But yeah, Tippett, I mean, really, really strong game. getting the game-winning goal there, and then obviously Paling too with the two goals in the game. Without that, they're not even in the position to have it go to overtime. And him and Farabee, ever since Paling and him have kind of been put back together, really good chemistry between the two. Like that setup that Farabee had, that was kind of the give and go between him and Paling in that first period, or I don't know if it was the first or second period there. But yeah, nonetheless, like that goal was really, really nice. And both of them key contributors to the Flyers, getting their 3-game win streak here. And yeah, that Paling goal was in the second that I was talking about. But yeah,
Yeah.
Flyers they're rolling, right? They're just
Yeah.
executing on all cylinders in close games, and you can't really ask for much more from a team that nobody really expected to kind of be in this position. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think very well said. Our next topic, I mean, we kind of mentioned it already. But Erson, I mean, he
yeah,
is look, I'll say this, the team is playing well around him. They're giving him an
definitely.
opportunity to do well, right? But when they need the save, he's there, right? Like once you get past the Flyers' really annoying defense, team defense, once you
Yeah.
get around that physicality, the shot blocking, the sticks in your lane, all the little things that they're doing right, you still have to score on Airson, and it has not been easy. And that's literally what you ask of a goalie. That's how a goalie has great numbers, right? Is when you put him in a position to succeed. If you take any great goalie in the league, and this is what we saw with Carter Hart, any great goalie in the league, and you play like shit in front of him, his numbers are going to suffer. They're
Yeah.
not, and they're not end all be all. They can steal a game here and there, but like
You
it's
need
not
support as
no.
a goaltender.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you need the predictability. Remember all those backdoor goals that were being given up on Carter Hart? That was horrible defense
Yeah.
prior to Torts getting here. So now that you're actually having it, like Airson is there to make the save when it needs to happen, and he's played perfect of late. He has even in some of his wins, he wasn't perfect in those games, but he was very good in all of those games. There are games he gave up 3 goals, okay, but he gave most of those goals weren't savable, or it was a
Yeah.
very tough save to make.
But in
So
those situations too, he's still bringing the Flyers to overtime or things like that. So
and the
like they're still
shootout,
getting points.
the
Yeah,
shootout and the
exactly.
breakaways, he's been
Oh,
very, very good
unstoppable,
on.
really.
Yeah, dude. I think he's given up one breakaway
Yeah.
goal against a guy who literally barely misses on
TJ
breakaway.
Oshie, yeah,
Yeah, for some
exactly.
reason, TJ Oshie is the best faceoff guy in the NHL. Um, and it's just really great to see. And we're hearing stuff about Carter Hart. I guess I'll kind of roll on this. He's kind of having like sick problems. They said they kind of discovered what it is. I don't really know what it is, to be honest with you. I didn't see anything. I
There's
haven't really.
nothing that's definitively been stated about what it
Right.
is. Like it's obviously something that I mean is bothering him and like something that can reoccur.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't have really any insight, and the Flyers haven't given any insight. And I'd imagine that Hart himself, like, is probably not one that wants that release into the public sphere. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect the Flyers to release it unless he has to miss like long or significant periods of time. But I don't foresee that happening. Kevin Kurz of The Athletic, really nice guy, by the way. He mentioned that Hart missing yesterday's game unexpectedly, even though they thought he was going to be ready. It had to do with like a setback in terms of fatigue. Apparently, he was just feeling very tired, and the Flyers don't think it's anything serious, but they just want to make sure that's the case, and they gave him the adequate rest before playing like a fatigued goaltender. And that kind of makes sense. Like you have Urson playing really well, so why would you play Hart? Who
It's the
isn't
luxury of
feeling
two good
well?
goalies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So why play him? I totally understand management's decision. And just actually before we started recording this, the Flyers announced that they loaned Cal Peterson back to the AHL. So that essentially gives a sign that Hart will likely be ready for the Flyers matchup tomorrow, whether that be, in a starting capacity
Or backup.
against Nashville or a backup. I mean, we'll have to wait
He'll
and
be
see,
playing one of
but
those 2 games, right? Because
definitely.
they're back to back games.
Yeah, exactly. So he'll likely be either against the Red Wings here or Nashville. Maybe they give him the extra day. Who knows?
Yeah, I
But
suspect that it might be Nashville. Or I guess you could make the argument and give Erson the rest, but I even with how well Erson has played, you have not heard Tortorella say that Hart is not our guy.
yeah,
Again, I
exactly.
see Erson is like clear cut starting goaltender in the league,
Yeah,
and then
clear cut
he's
potential for that.
yeah,
But
and again, he's only like a year younger than
well,
Hart.
I mean, just the numbers he's putting up, right? Like that I mentioned before, like he's 8-1-1 in his last 10, 929 save percentage, um, like plus 11.11 goal save above expected. Like obviously he has the potential and the skills to be a really good goaltender. Looks like he could be a starter, but just because you've only done like it's still a very small sample size, like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing with goalies. Like we've seen it happen to Hart in the past, right? Where he had really good numbers coming in, and then he struggled real mightily for a couple seasons there. So there's no telling what's going to happen with Urson. Not going to
Well,
say that he's going to struggle or anything, but every goaltender does have their struggles. We've
sure.
seen him have some
I
earlier in the season. But like, yeah, he's only played really 25 games in the NHL. So, you can't deem a guy a starting goaltender based off that, but like it obviously looks promising the way he's playing.
yeah.
He's got to follow it up with a couple strong seasons before you can definitively say, yeah, like he's a bona fide NHL starter on an
Yeah.
every night basis.
Yeah, and again, don't forget the Flyers have played well in front of him, right? And
Yeah,
I as
exactly.
long as they do that, I don't suspect we'll see really like any blunders from these guys, either one of them, Hart or Ersson. So I expect them both to play well. I mean, look, Ersson could end up being a star goalie too.
Exactly.
But to your point, he's got to prove it a little bit longer than that. We just know, like when I see Carter Hart's down numbers, I know where they're coming from. Yeah, there's a half season where he didn't play his best hockey, and to your point. But outside of that, I mean, you can pretty much look at all goalies throughout history that have that in the early part of their career, especially when they're brought in the NHL way too early. Even Shesterkin's got, a few games where he doesn't play amazing, right? And he came in at 24. So, you just look at where they're going. They have two potential star goaltenders, right? One of which I would say is a star already, and the other one, in a little bit of time, might prove to be that as well. And he's locked up for the next 2 years beyond this at less than $2 million a year. So that tells me you keep both goalies and you allow Kolosov to play in the minors for at least a year, and let him prove it, right? Maybe he'll need 2 years, and then you have Zavragin and Bjarnason, right? You have other goalies coming beyond that, so they're just in a really great spot with goaltending. And I do not think that the Flyers should go out and trade Carter Hart or Ersson. To make that clear, I think they should hold on to both of them. And
It's
until,
clearly paying off right now, right? It
well,
shows the
look,
benefits of it. So
if Kolosov comes in next year and he's like as good as the two of them, then you have a
then you
very
have a
different
problem.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
then you have
exactly.
well, I don't know if it's a problem. It's like
It's a good problem
yeah,
though.
it's a good problem. But then you have an opportunity to trade. But until that happens, you keep your strengths.
Yeah,
Right. Like
exactly.
this whole we said it since the offseason. This whole, oh, they're 2, 3 years, 3, 4, 5 years away from being good. That's all bullshit. How many of those people are saying that now?
No one.
Yeah, it was a nonsense statement to begin with. We told you it was nonsense. That's why you don't make decisions like that. And we'll talk about trades. And that's why you don't make the decision with trades like that either. And I think that was one of Chuck Fletcher's biggest blunders. But we'll get to that. So let's talk about Cam York. So Cam York has just looked really strong. Obviously, that game against Detroit where he played with Ristolainen, which is interesting because I brought this up and we talked about it, and I think you agreed with me if I remember correctly. Is like that would also be a really good pairing.
It
That's a
would,
pairing
yeah.
we assumed was going to be here. They complement each other really well. But Cam York is playing really well with whoever he's playing with, and Ristolainen's playing great, and the whole team is kind of like there's nobody really to pick on.
Yeah.
Maybe Atkinson, but he hasn't necessarily played
Well,
poorly.
I
Um, go
I
ahead,
just
go
find
ahead.
it ironic that I mean, you look at the defensive core to start, the season, and you have Sanheim, York, Ristolainen, Walker, Sealers, Zamula Stahl. That was essentially what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
Throw Andre in there potentially, right? And if you look at that, group there, the depth really didn't seem like it was very strong, and most people thought that was the weak point of the team, but arguably, like I was mentioning before, right? Like with the 81 goals against and seventh in the NHL with fewest goals allowed in the league, and the 2.61 goals against, and that's tied for sixth lowest. Like the defense is their biggest strength, despite the fact that before the season started, probably everybody thought it was the biggest weakness. So
yeah.
it just shows how sometimes, even though it looks like something and it looks like it might occur in a certain way, you have to really let it play out to make an assessment. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, and I guess we'll roll this into the next topic, which is will the deep pairings change?
yeah.
And at this point, I would say not anytime soon. The one thing I look at, and we're gonna get into trades and all that a little bit, but the one things I look at is like it would be great if we could play York with Risto, but then who do you put
with
with
Sanheim.
Sandheim? You're not going to
Yeah.
throw. I mean, I guess you could try Stahl there, but like you know, Zamula is not necessarily ready for that kind of role
No.
to play those kind of minutes,
Well,
and you're not going to break up Sealer and
I
Walker.
think
So
I think it's clear that Tortorella is kind of etching Cam York into that number two role.
yeah,
Like if you look at
which
it,
he
right?
is
Yeah, which is true. That's what I mean. So like if you look at it, he has 22, 28 of average time on ice this season so far.
very
York
good,
does, and that's the
very good.
second on the team other than Travis Sanheim, right? So for Tortorella to be trusting him to play, I mean, all those minutes. And the thing is, when you're playing on the top pair, it's not just the fact that you're playing all those minutes, but it's against top competition, right? Other teams' top lines. That's what's the most impressive to me is that York's held his own even in that situation where he's playing against the other team's best players. And yeah, like the only other defenseman that's close to York is Walker, who has 20, 48 of average time on ice, and York has essentially 2 minutes on him there. So obviously, Tortorella and Shaw, they really trust York in his ability to handle that and play against the other top lines. And it shows as a 22-year-old that really, I mean, the sky's essentially the limit for what the potential is, right? Like you're playing against top lines already as a young defenseman. When do you really see 22-year-olds play that level of minutes, right? Like you see like guys that are obviously top, like drafted tops in the draft, stuff like that. Like Cam York's a first round pick, but he's not top 10 or top 5 or anything of that nature. And even look at like Flyers past defenseman like a Sanheim, for example, he hasn't really gone top pairing minutes until this year, being 27 years old, right? So for a 22-year-old to get that kind of trust from the coaching staff, I think it definitely shows that they believe he can handle it and just have faith in his skill set and what he can do. But I think it's been just for York, like more even impressively on the defensive side of things, right? Like just keeping a lot of plays at the perimeter, killing plays with the stick work, the positioning, the gap control, then obviously just the outlet passing, like just a really strong passer out of his own zone. And the offense, even though it hasn't been the most impressive in comparison with the defense, like over the first 22 games of the season, York only had 7 points. Over the last 9 games, he has 5 points. And in those 9 games, 2 of the points are power play points. So even on the power play, some of it's coming around a little, but obviously, I think the one thing for York is the power play. Like they want to really unlock that. He's been known to be a quarterback at all lower levels and historically
Mhm.
has produced a lot. But I just think with the way York's playing, just to answer the question in a roundabout way here, I don't think they'll really change the pairings because why would you change what is working? Like you have Sanheim in a number one role who's never played that position before, essentially playing the best hockey of his career. You have York playing really the best hockey of his career at the NHL so far at a young age against top competition. And you have Ristolainen coming back from injury, rounding into form, and Sealer and Walker arguably both of them having the best career or best seasons of their career too, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, I just don't think that there's anything to change here. But what do you think, Yariv?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything to change right now. I think when we look at trades, like if you really want to trade, like let's say theoretically, though, I do want to get into trades actually, but if let's say you move on from Walker, or Risto, like you look to be like, okay, can we have two really great pairings and separate York and Sandheim and add another guy who can play a top pairing, and then
Yeah.
you got three guys who can play those kind of
Well,
minutes, and you do Sandheim, and let's say I'm just saying this out, you find a top pairing guy like on the equivalence of Dougie Hamilton, and then all of a sudden, you have on paper a really dominant looking defensive unit. I would say there's opportunity for that, but until a guy like that shows up here and they're playing the way they are, I don't think it will change.
yeah, I agree. I think status quo for now. But you read my mind because I was about to say, like, I think that's what the defensive core is missing to kind of branch the depth out a bit. Because if there's an injury here, you could see things kind of spiral a bit potentially. Who knows, just with the chemistry. But I mean, if you do get that other top pair guy to play with Sandheim, like Hamilton equivalent, for example, or like Petrangelo equivalent. Those have been like some of the two biggest free agents on defense the last couple seasons, but someone of that ilk, then you can move York down and you're really way better equipped to handle some of the top teams, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of have two pairs that can maybe go up against the top line versus just the one right now. So I think that's what the Flyers will be looking to do. And I wouldn't be surprised in the summer, depending on who's available, if that's one of their main goals, because you're going to have two first round picks. And typically, if you're going to get a number one type defenseman or top pairing type defenseman, you're going to be giving up some picks. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a pick is on the move here if they are looking to make a move like that this summer. But we'll see. Maybe is it this summer they look to do it and add salary? Maybe they kind of clear out a bit more and then they wait, an
Right.
extra year and kind of maybe wait for Mitchkov. But I think it's all kind of in fluctuation, and maybe how the team finishes this season might also play into where the management staff kind of gauges what the needs are. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is just in terms of the trades, like Sealer and Walker, in terms of expected goals percentage, are 58.6% and are ninth in the league as a pairing, with minimum ice time being needing to be 100 minutes. So like it just shows like two guys that nobody expected to be this good and have this much of an impact on a game-to-game basis are the ninth best pairing in the league in terms of expected goals percentage. So it's just nuts the way the defense is
I
playing
I
right now.
I totally agree with that. I think there is a little bit of us underestimating Sealer coming in this year because he did play really well
He
last
did,
year,
yeah.
and I feel like people were like kind of brushing that off as being like, well, he played well
Well,
out of a bunch of bad defensemen, and it's like that's not really how things work. It's like, did he do well in his role? And he did. And he's even better this year, which that's what I didn't anticipate. I didn't think he had even another half step above that. You know what I mean? Which he's proven to do. But I think we should have given him a little bit more credit. That's all I'm saying.
no, I agree. I think
All
a
of
lot of
us, myself
people,
included.
yeah, me too. I mean, I definitely didn't see this coming. I
You
think
were
what
high
it
on
is,
Walker, though. I will say that. That was you were saying that
yeah.
months ago.
Well, yeah, he just played top four for the Kings in the past, and I mean they were a decent team defensively. So I figured if you're going to crack that top four, you could probably do it again
They're
on a
good
Flyers team that didn't
compliment.
have a lot of depth. But for Sealer, I just think it's the fact that hey, like he played on a third pair role mainly in his career, and now this is kind of a second pair role almost. So it's almost like a out of nowhere type of thing. But obviously,
It's
when you
almost
have
like
to,
players don't finish developing in their mid
yeah,
twenties, huh?
exactly. But Sealer's definitely in his prime right now, being 29.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is probably the best you're going to get from him. And I think him and Walker really complement each other perfectly because you have the one
Yeah.
guy who's the more offensive minded, and Sealer can kind of just focus on the defensive side of things,
Yes.
really.
Yes. I totally agree. They're a great complement for one another. And it's like, look, if we could theoretically hold on to both of them and make that our bottom pairing moving
Yeah,
forward, I mean, for a playoff team, there's a reason you're hearing about those, these trade because a playoff team adding a bottom pairing like that, the way they're playing for us right now, and they're not playing like a bottom pairing. And if you
they're
add that,
the
you're
second pairing right now, basically.
yeah, I mean they're playing like it. And again, this is one of the best defensive teams in the league. So it's not like, oh, well, they're not great defensively. That's why they're no. They're playing exceptional. So they could come into a team that has a high powered offense. Let's just say, Edmonton Oilers, who are not in a position to do this, but if the Oilers add these two guys, they drastically improve their defense. Though I will say,
Well,
I do think Tortorella and Brad Shaw have a big influence on the way this team plays defense as a whole.
100%.
And
Yeah.
it's also we have defensive minded players on this
Well,
team too.
even I mean Walker's mentioned the system is just perfect and tailored to his game almost, and he said how much he enjoys playing in this particular
Do
system.
I
So
do I
I
hear a
think
discount on a re-signing?
yeah, maybe, but I think in terms of that, you just have to be wary if you're a team even trying to acquire them, because let's say you do acquire them and it doesn't fit in the system that you're trying to implement, right? So if you look at it that way and the Flyers do end up trading them, let's say it could end up being a steal, maybe from a Flyers perspective, where you trade two guys
Ab-
that reach their
Absolutely.
potential in one system, but then aren't able to duplicate it again. But I think if you're going to trade Walker and Sealer as a pairing together, just the fact that there's a chemistry and
You're
they
asking
play
for a lot.
together, yeah, you're at least in my mind need to be getting a first round pick, or else I'm not even having the conversation.
Yeah.
So
Or a high second. And again, I agree with you. I'm not even having that conversation. Like, there's no reason.
the first makes me think about it, but without that, yeah, I wouldn't trade them, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And well, let's get into the other topics. We'll get back into trading in a few minutes here. So, do you want to talk about the power play? So the one thing I noticed, and I noticed this last night specifically, it's like this team, the way they play on the power play is so distant from the way they play in every other situation. Like I even noticed it last night. They got off the power play and immediately started firing the puck at the net. Like
Oh man.
immediately, shot after shot after shot. I'm like, how is this not translating to the team? And again, I hate shitting on Rocky Thompson because I think he's doing a good job outside of the power play. Like I can't blame all of the power play on him. Like I'm not a big fan of doing that. I didn't do that for other coaches. But I'll say that like and maybe he's even saying this to them, but like the lack of shooting on the power
Yeah.
play. And
I
Tortorella
mean,
said this himself. It drives me insane. I talk about it all the time. We've talked about it. Predictability. I hear this on every podcast. The predictability of power play is irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. Everyone's got footage on you. They know what you're going to do. It's about quickness and execution. 1-2 shoot. And the
yeah.
amount of times that they clutch and don't shoot and worry about getting blocked or whatever drives me insane. It should be 1-2 shoot almost every time. And they have that at 5-on-5, and they're incredibly successful on the penalty kill. They get in around the net. They shoot. It's the times that they bullshit, quite frankly, that they're bullshitting around the net, trying to do these fancy ass passes. You don't have Claude Giroux here. Knock that shit off. 1-2 shoot. Like, and that's really what's driving me nuts. It's not that I think that they're not talented enough to have a middle of the road power play. Like maybe they're not going to have a top 5 power play, right? But they can have a middle of the road power play with the talent they have in hand right now. This is not a team that lacks high end talent. I don't believe in that statement at all. They don't have a superstar right now. You know, they don't have like a guy who's going to lead the league
But
in
they have
points.
guys that can score with the
Yeah.
man advantage
Yeah.
and
You
have
can
nice
see
shots,
you
right?
can
Like,
see teams with superstars at the
yeah.
bottom of the
But I mean,
league
look at
in
okay, like
power
look
play.
at Konechny, look at Tippett, look at Forster, for example. Those are three guys that can show and have shown in the past they can beat goalies clean from distance. And I mean, on the power play with the extra man, you should be able.
Atkinson too.
Atkinson too, yeah. But on the power play with an
Boots,
extra man,
Farabee.
I mean, you should be able to kind of utilize that and utilize those players' shots. I think for the Flyers in the power play, like it's almost an aggression thing. Like look at 5-on-5. They play really aggressive and they're kind of on the puck and they're really tenacious. Look at
Assertive.
penalty kill. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. On the power play, it's almost like the mindset and the mentality kind of
Right.
flips. But
Exactly.
I think what happens is, and the reason for that is, as a player, you know you have the extra man. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, let's get it in, let's set up, let's take some extra time. But this team is best in terms of their offensive production when they're playing in an aggressive manner. So they should just continue in that way and in that kind of process, right? Changing it up and kind of making it more lackadaisical and looking for that perfect play. That's not what this team is. They need to play with aggressiveness to be effective offensively. That's what their whole style is based upon, right? Essentially being aggressive, high volume amount of shots at the net in every other situation except for the power play where they just for some reason aren't shooting at all. So they should really just continue that, right? Like high volume of shots, shoot it at every opportunity. My opinion with the power play is you have Owen Tippett, you have Konechny, you have Forster, you have three guys with plus NHL shots that can beat goaltenders. What should be the move is to set those guys up as much as possible and tell them to rip shots at the goalie
Yeah.
and create rebounds, get screens, cause havoc. Don't telegraph, the shots. Essentially, just try to shoot often when the shooting lanes kind of present those opportunities for themselves. But I just think it's a mindset thing, right? Like it's not a talent thing. The Flyers
Yeah.
are a team that
100%.
they have, players that can score. We've seen them, be able to stay in high scoring games, be able to, play with good teams in the league, who have been able to, score a bunch of goals. So I just don't understand really why the power play can't do it as well here. But I think it's just a mindset thing and trying to shoot the puck more really and getting, more aggressive if possible.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. The assertiveness and aggressiveness is lacking on the power play. And I don't understand why. Like it's crazy to watch their mentality shift from the power play to even strength. And You see it in like real time.
It's that
Like
extra space, that extra ice. I think they have
it's
that,
like, oh, what
second
do
to
I
make another
do?
pass and all that stuff.
They need to get it's like in their head. And again, if they get up to 20, I'll be happy at this point. It just needs to get to a point where they're not like it's not even that they're
Well,
immensely terrible and
yeah.
constantly turning the puck over, but it's like
I
sometimes it is.
mean, you know what though? Like, come on. In their last 16 power play chances, I tweeted this last night. They're 0 for 16. So, I mean, that's pretty abysmal. Or actually, not even. In their last 17 power play chances, they're 0 for
Yeah.
17. So
Yeah.
it's abysmal, obviously. Like in 17 chances, you should at least with the players they have and the shots some of these players
You
have,
can be in the 20 to
they should at
15
least have
range.
one goal, man, out of 17
Right.
chances,
Exactly.
Like they
Like
don't even
that.
have one. Come on.
Yes, it's a mentality change. It just has to change. And look, if they assuming they make the playoffs, it's a whole new ball game when it comes to
Yeah.
special teams. But if you can't score in the power play in the playoffs, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Those are huge momentum shifting moments, and the other team will thrive off of it. So it's something they must clean up
Yeah.
moving
Because
forward.
that could be what really burns them, right?
If
If they make it in the
if they
postseason
were
here. So
even somewhat, I've said it over and over again. If they were somewhat competent on the power play, they were middle of the road on the power play, they would be one of the top teams in the NHL right now in
yeah, I mean,
in winning percentage. They would be in the top 5.
agreed. I
They
mean, they
would they
probably
would be.
would. They
It's almost a
probably
fact.
I mean, because they're ninth right now overall in the NHL, with 39 points. So I mean,
And that's what
yeah,
gave New Jersey momentum last night. Is the Flyers can't do anything on the power play.
pretty much,
It
and
drives
that's a
me it drives me
problem, right?
nuts.
So
Yeah. It's
it's a
something this
momentum
yeah,
negative for them, whereas the penalty kill like adds to their momentum. It's just
sure.
crazy how
Yeah.
that's flipped so
And
often
and
here.
look, you could add a Gauthier and a Mitchkov and improve the power play, I'm sure. But if they continue to play on the power play the way they're playing now, even with those two
It's not going to
guys,
matter. Yeah.
they're middle of the road. They're not going to be top 5. If you go back to when the Flyers had arguably the best power play in the NHL, they were like top 3, top 5 every year with Giroux and Simmons and Voracek. Again, Voracek couldn't even hit the net, but they executed quickly.
Quickly. Yeah.
1-2 pass, shoot. Yes, Giroux can get again a franchise caliber player could get away with holding the puck longer and but everything was decisive.
Well, he's trying to draw people into him,
He was a
right? So,
quarterback out there. It
yeah.
was when Giroux got you the puck, you shot. When Simmons got the puck on his hand, he had 2-3 moves, and that was pretty much it. He wasn't like trying to make plays. It just get it back to Giroux. Everything was simple.
Yeah,
And I think they really have to get back to that. And if you have to name Frost as that guy or name TK or whoever, whatever you want to do, but you have to get organized and decisive on the power play. Otherwise, you're going to keep seeing this because even when they get in the zone, they don't do anything with it. They just circle around the outside forever. And I'm like, they should have shot there, should have shot. There's no downside to getting the puck on net. None. Absolutely none. At the very least, you draw an offensive call.
You get a rebound, and who knows
Yeah,
what's
I'm
going to
not saying to
happen.
shoot into people's pads, but get a simple shot in on net.
Sometimes just shooting into somebody's pads, and you get a
Yeah.
rebound chance. That's how you score on the power play.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to do that from what I've seen, but not enough. More.
Yeah,
Double down
definitely.
on it. And not enough shots from inside the slot. I'll tell you that much. And Couturier is good at that. I've watched him be good.
Why, like I said, like I don't understand, at least with the way their shooters are, I don't understand why they're not setting things up more from behind the net versus on the wall. I just think they don't have the passing ability to make those cross ice passes. And down low, where you go low to high, for example, into the slot, I think that's where they're better suited to score.
Yeah,
so.
you might be right. And it's something we don't see enough of. And it's super frustrating about this team. All right, we'll get into some playoff trades and whatnot. I want to address this because it's been going on online. So apparently Elliot Friedman made a comment about Johnny Gaudreau and how Columbus, because they've been struggling, even though they had a huge win the other night, and he had a goal and 2 assists, ironically. They scored 8 goals in that game, and he had 3 points in it. But Johnny Gaudreau to the Flyers has popped up. It's absolute nonsense. I'll say it right now. As close to zero as you want to get. The Flyers are not trading for a guy in his early 30s with a humongous contract. It's not happening. Unless they want to eat
anyway.
If they want to eat 50% of that contract, I think we would consider it. But why would they do that? Two, why would we trade for a guy like Johnny Gaudreau when we're very deep at wing, when we have a bunch of young wingers as well? And again, the message has been pretty consistent from leadership. Plan hasn't changed. And that's what it means to rebuild. It means not to trade for a guy in his early 30s. This is something Chuck Fletcher did not understand. Not to trade to a guy in his early 30s. Why I didn't like the Ryan Ellis trade, though people don't agree with me, probably even till today. And we'll talk about Nolan Patrick. But again, you don't trade two young guys for an aging player with a large contract. It is a risky move.
Yeah.
If you are going for a championship and you have a great team and you somehow have the cap to fit this guy in, okay, it can be the icing on the cake, and then it's worth it if you win a championship, right? Then whatever. Who cares after that? You got the championship. You're good. Fan base is happy. And you can move assets because everybody wants a piece of your team because they're champions. But you don't make that type of trade. Like, it wasn't smart at the time, and now we're saddled with that. This is why I didn't want the Travis Sanheim trade for Torrey Krug. I'm like, again, we got to do this? Trade for a guy in his early 30s with a big contract? How stupid would we look now making that trade instead of just having Travis Sanheim? For a late first round pick to have an aging defender? What are we going to do with Torrey Krug next year? How well would Torrey Krug do under Tortorella and Brad Shaw? I'm not saying he would be awful here, but he's not like a defensive dynamo. He's worse defensively than Sanheim even the previous year. So I don't know. I see this Johnny Gaudreau thing. It's a whole line of bullshit, and it clearly does not come out of anywhere. And I'm sorry. Well, let me get this out. Elliot Friedman didn't bring up the Flyers as being a definite spot for Johnny Gaudreau. Now, maybe you could look at it as like, oh, Philly has always wanted Johnny Gaudreau, but like that's kind of in the past. And and to Chuck Fletcher's credit, he didn't make that trade because I assume leadership stopped him from bringing him in.
Yeah, he definitely didn't make that signing. I think it possibly just leadership.
Which credit to him.
He was really, I think, really the reason he did do it is because they didn't have cap space. And he wasn't a creative enough GM to find cap space.
Yeah,
just because he wasn't that great at his job, obviously.
Yeah. Well, he put himself in a hole.
Yeah, but for Gaudreau, I mean, I think Elliot Friedman. You have to understand, right? Like he does a show based on trade rumors. If there's no trade rumors to discuss, then
he's just throwing out topics.
Where's the show, right? Like he wants to talk about trades. He wants to talk about topics, something interesting. He brings it up. Does not mean it's gospel. Does not mean it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, Gaudreau and Philly are always going to have ties. I mean, he's from Philly. He's from the area, so it makes sense. So no matter, as long as he's in the NHL, there's always going to be some form of ties.
I'm sure you would be happy to come here.
But it doesn't make sense where the Flyers are, right? Like in a rebuilding process, you're not going to add a guy like a Gaudreau unless the Flyers were, like you said, Yariv, a cup contender, and they're looking to make a Stanley Cup push, and that's kind of the final piece. So the fact that they're not in that mode right now and not in that area, I don't think they're going to add Gaudreau. And personally, if you're going to add anything to this team, you need to add a number one defenseman who's definitively a bona fide number one, or you need to add another centerman because they lack depth in that area potentially.
Not
a winger. That's literally
another undersized scoring winger.
Yeah, that's literally their position of strength. They have way too many scoring wingers right now. They're probably going to end up trading some wingers because it's just how it works with the numbers game. So add another one in does not make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And again, this is not a defensive first player, so Tortorella is not gonna love his game. What I think Columbus should do is wait it out.
Yeah,
your team is not that bad. They have a lot of youth there. Maybe find a new coach. Yeah, it's like wait it out, and I think that's what they're gonna do.
I think Vincent just isn't the right fit. Like, I mean, they're playing Fantilli on the fourth line. Like, that's just not the way to do it.
Are they?
They were the last few games, yeah.
Oh my god.
I feel bad for him, but what are you gonna do?
And he's close to a point a game player. That's
I know, and they're playing him on the fourth line.
That's absolutely pathetic. I'm sorry. It's pathetic. You don't put that kid on the fourth line. I will say I saw somebody saying Flyers trade Cutter Gauthier to Columbus for Johnny Gaudreau, and it's like, you have got to be out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah, why would that ever be a thing?
That's like the ridiculous shit that comes out of our Twitter, and it's like, that's absolute not. That just shows you that
It's
there's
literally like you're
nothing here.
trading one guy who's just potentially exiting his prime, potentially on the downslope of his career, as a huge
For
contract
Yeah,
for
for
a guy that's
potentially one of the
just
best players of the world that
for the
could
next
be.
10, 15 seasons, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're right on that. Yeah,
Great asset management.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So okay, next topic are the playoffs themselves. Uh, and the question is, and I'm seeing a lot of this, and I actually am curious to see what you think about this, but there is this assumption that with the Flyers lacking high end talent, which again I'm so sick of hearing that, and I don't even agree with it or care about it. That the Flyers can't make noise in the playoffs, right? And I
Um,
am seeing a little bit of change in the winds on that. I will give people some credit. I'm hearing less of it now, just because it's kind of undeniable. But do the Flyers have enough to make any noise in the playoffs? And I think that really is defined getting past the first round, being at least very competitive in the second round, and maybe even potentially making it to the third round. I'll say this right now: if they continue playing the way they're playing, and I even said it last year, if they learn how to play playoff style hockey and they take that attitude into the playoffs, and you have two great goalies and you score through team depth,
yeah.
I mean, that is the way to be successful in the playoffs. Now, I'm not saying that for sure that's going to happen, but I definitely think that that is out there. Look, I don't look at them on paper and go, this is a Stanley Cup winning team. And maybe when they match up against really good teams, right, that also play really great defense, you see that maybe that would be a problem for them. But if they match up against teams that rely heavily on goal scoring, they'll beat those teams. And you can see that. The teams that rely heavily on offense struggle against the Flyers. They do. Because that's not a brand of hockey that's that
Yeah.
successful against high defensive teams. And if the Islanders were able to do that stuff back in the day, the Flyers will be able to do that today. I'm not saying they're a Stanley Cup winning team, though it is always possible. The odds are not high on that, but I think they are capable of making noise in the playoffs if they continue to play the way that they're playing. Um, and I think that's, kind of loops into the next topic of, is it even the right move to trade players? But first, let's get your opinion on the playoff noise.
Yeah. If you look at the playoffs, I think it just first off, you point out the elements of the Flyers games that could translate really
Yeah,
well in the playoffs. Like you said, tight defense, you know, supporting one another in all areas of the ice that you have to do to be successful in the playoffs. Really good goaltending. And then also just really good penalty kill, right? Like those are all factors that make you a successful team
the power play.
in the playoffs. The power play obviously is something too, but that could be something that would be for the other side of the argument. Maybe that's
Sure.
why they wouldn't be successful, and that could potentially burn them in a series if they can never score on it. But I think there's definitely elements in their game that could translate well to playoff hockey, but we have to wait and see. It's always a different thing in the playoffs, and
Yeah.
a lot of these guys haven't played in the playoffs. So until you get there, it could be, a different animal, especially if you're playing against a more experienced team that kind of knows how to flip the switch for that playoff style type of hockey. But for me, what it is and what it comes down to mostly is the matchups. Like right now, I think it
So true.
depends on where the Flyers finish. So they're second in the Metro. If they finish second or third, hypothetically, and they face the Islanders here, or they face Carolina, like they've beat the Islanders this season, they've beat Carolina this season. So I think they should be able to have a pretty close competitive series. And in that case, I think they definitely could win a first round against the Islanders or the Hurricanes potentially if they finish in a wild card spot. And they have to face Boston or the Rangers. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, right? What happens because those teams, do have some of that more high end skill, and the Flyers have not beaten the Rangers this season. They haven't played Boston yet, so we'll kind of see how they match up. But I think those will be tougher matchups for them, right? Like if they
Yeah.
have to play the Rangers, have to play Boston. But I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to compete and have a close series with the Islanders or Carolina, the two teams that are kind of in the realm that of playing them right now if the playoffs start today. So just for the listeners here, if the playoffs start today, the Flyers would be playing the Islanders. Carolina's right behind them with 37 points, so they could be in the mix too. So that's why I kind of mentioned those two teams. But that's
Yeah.
my opinion on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Carolina would be a very tough matchup for the Flyers in the playoffs.
I just think their goaltending stinks, and the Flyers' goaltending is better. And what wins in the playoffs?
Yeah.
your
But
goaltending. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. But the way they play for
yeah, exactly.
you can see it during the season.
Both
The
series would be tough.
Islanders,
Both series would be tough.
yeah,
Islanders or Carolina.
right,
I just
exactly.
think they'd have a better chance of beating those teams than a Boston or a Rangers. It would be close. I
Well,
think Islanders,
they'll all be
Carolina
tough,
would
but
be
yeah,
like 6 or 7 games.
yeah. And the Rangers have played good D, so I'm not, you know what I mean? Like they're a very dangerous team. They're first overall in the league, so
Yeah,
I'm not poo pooing anybody. Look, it's gonna be very tough for them to beat any team in the playoffs.
exactly.
But to that point, Flyers goaltending stand up strong. And even if one of them goes down or something, you still got to face the other one, and
Yeah.
that's a lot to deal with for a team. And we've seen teams ride hot goalies, and that's where goalies become humongous difference makers
In the
are in
playoffs.
series. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why I would say that, right? Like the Flyers
right.
have a chance potentially in any series unless it's really against the top echelon teams, just because they have strong goaltending. Whereas in
Yes,
the past, you had a
yeah. It's
Brian
just Thurfinn
Elliott or
is
something.
amazing.
Like, sure, Elliott's played well in the past, but Brian Elliott, isn't the same level as a Harder Urson has been this season. So
Yeah, no, I agree. So I guess the question leads, is it even the right move to trade anybody, right? So as they approach the playoffs, the conversations continue to ramp up about trades, and I'm seeing people, oh, they have to move Walker and Sealer, and we kind of brought it up already, but they got to move all these guys. It's like I I don't agree with that at all,
yeah,
whatsoever. And it's also way too early to even have those conversations. It all depends on, and this is what I brought this up at this was brought up at the fan event. And because people were asking this question, and I get that it's on everybody's mind, but like, how do you do that to a team that's played this well and this hard? You just take away their middle pairing and just go, yeah, well, have at it, guys. It's a big part of your
you're
leadership
almost
group.
stabbing them in the back,
Yeah.
essentially.
It's like, how can you do that as a leader of an organization to just
Yeah.
cut the feet from under them? I think the reality is if you go into the playoffs where the team is and what they're stating publicly, you don't add, right? So you don't give up any assets and you go, well, this is our investment in the team is that we're not removing anybody in a rebuild year, right? We'll hold on, we'll give up on the extra picks, right? And that's worth it to us just to have any playoff success at all, right?
Yeah.
And I think it all depends on where this team is come beginning of March, right? Like end of February. If they're in second place in the division, they ain't moving anybody. Sorry. Like it's not happening. Look, I could be wrong, but I would say 90% chance they're not moving anybody.
I
Why
agree.
would you as a leader, if they are fighting for a playoff spot, if they find themselves in ninth or 10th place, there's a chance, right? And even then, I'm not certain that they will. They might be like, well, let them grind it out and make it to the end of the year. If they're out of a playoff spot, 100%. 100% they're moving on from Walker and Sealer, and maybe they'll re-sign them in the offseason, right? But if you're not a playoff team, that's a very different conversation than if you are a playoff team. And being a playoff team changes everything. And that is the reality. One series, even if it's 4 games, is worth a ton to this organization. That changes everything. All of a sudden you are a playoff team that is adding Cutter Gauthier for sure. And if you can bring in Mitch Coverly too, think about what message that sends for the city. You go from being not being talked about at all to being a playoff team that just added 2 superstar young players. The entire city's talking about you in ticket sales, jersey sales alone. This is a business. It's money. It's money. It's not just assets. It's money. And yeah, they have money, but they've been not making as much money as they could in the past. In fact, their organization value is ranked, I think, like eighth and 1.6
Used
something
to be top
billion.
5 at a point. So
Exactly. It's dropped. That's not great. It should be top 5. This is a crazy sports city. So they want to get that back up. And
playoffs does that, obviously.
thank you. Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, just I don't know, like with the trading, it all just depends really on where the teams act. Like you put it perfectly, right? I mean, if they're in second place, I think you're selling your team short if you pull the plug on them and you trade guys that got them to this point. Let's see what the group can do. And it's, we've mentioned it so many times how valuable it is to go down a stretch run and be in the playoffs and what it can do for young players' development, just to understand what it's like to be in those situations and learn how to win, but also take those situations when you lose and apply for the next year, right? Like nobody expects the Flyers to win the cup here, but you go to the first round and you lose, or you go to the second round and you lose, that puts a chip on the team's shoulder for next season, being more hungry, want to do even better, but also players understand what it takes to first play playoff hockey because numerous guys on the roster have not been even in the playoffs before. So you need to understand what it's like. It's two different things in the playoffs versus the regular season. The intensity ratchets up considerably, right? So just players understanding that, understanding what it takes to win. When all the chips are down, in the NHL playoffs and everything's on the line. I think you can't, simulate that in the regular season. So that experience is invaluable. So I think pulling the plug on a team, when they're playing well and potentially in that, second position or firmly in the playoffs, I just don't think that's something that the team's going to do. And I think they value player development and team building, and that is all a process of team building and developing your players in the right manner. So I just don't see Briere and the staff doing that when they've placed such an emphasis on it before. But to caveat, right, like if they're I think more than 3 points out or 4 points out, I think they probably would make trades and sell. But if it's 1 or 2 points, I see them, letting the team grind it out, battle for that final spot. And that's also a really good experience to be playing meaningful games down the stretch. So it definitely depends on where they're at. But if they're firmly in a playoff spot, I just don't see them making those types of moves. And potentially as well, too, like you have a Cutter Gauthier coming into the mix here. How good would it be to get him some playoff experience, right? And how good would that be for his development? And arguably, I don't think we're going to really get any movement on the trade front in terms of what's occurring here, probably until, a couple weeks before the trade deadline. Let's be serious. When do you really see trades made in the NHL before, the end of January? It's very, very slim. So I would expect February things to potentially pick up in terms of movement, but until that point, I mean, it's really going to just be speculation and talk about the trades versus actual action. So
Yeah, no, completely agree. So real quick, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Again, follow us on Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating on iTunes as well. It's a humongous help to us. All right, let's get into our NHL news here. So former Flyers coach, assistant and head coach, and longtime coach of the St. Louis Blues, also Stanley Cup winner, Craig Berube was relieved of his job between episodes here. Did happen a little bit ago. There's some drama going on in St. Louis. I didn't even really look into it just because I really don't care. But unfortunate news for Craig Berube, a guy who's a good coach, and I would not be surprised if he gets hired in during this season for another role because it's a little bit of firing season right now. This is the time where a lot of coaches get fired because teams are trying to, turn their season around. And you look at Columbus, maybe that's an opportunity for Craig Berube there. Turn that group around. He might be the right type of coach for that team. And yeah, I feel bad for Craig Berube. I mean, it happens to all of them. It happens to every coach, but he had a long tenure, so I don't think he's, obviously I'm sure he's upset about being fired, but I don't think he's disappointed in himself. Um, it's a team that he got a lot of success out of, and that was very competitive while he was
yeah.
here. But eventually, all coaches lose their locker room. Like our great coach Tortorella is doing exceptional right now. Lost locker rooms in the past. It happens to every coach around the league at a certain point, usually around the 5 year mark. And Craig Berube definitely was in the upper echelon of that. So good luck to him. I'm sure he will find a job pretty quickly.
Really good coach. Obviously, in any situation for pro sports like NHL, any league, every coach has an expiration date, right? And
Yep.
Berube won a cup and made the playoffs with the Blues several times. And in that situation, I mean, that's where he eventually gets fired, right? It just doesn't end up, you know, being able to stay longer than this season. But obviously, unfortunate, but he'll land back on his feet. There was a clip I wanted to play, so I'll kind of play it here into the
Sure.
mic essentially. But it's from the Cam and Strick podcast, basically asking the question, which is interesting that I thought, could Craig Berube find his way back with the Flyers? So just have a listen here, everyone.
On the power play.
East Coast. You never know if like a job like the Islanders would open up or the Devils would open up. Would he potentially want to jump in there? But my prediction, if I had to make a prediction, Tortorella and Craig Berube are very good friends. From what I understand, they've been talking
And
a
Keith
lot
Jones.
since Chief got let go,
That's a
and
great
they probably
point.
talked a lot even before that anyway. But there's been some talk about John Tortorella eventually, probably sooner than later, moving up into a managerial position. I don't think he wants to coach forever. He's making money. And, at some point, I think he's looking to transition into a managerial role with the Philadelphia Flyers. And don't be surprised if that happens and Craig Berube slides in as the head coach. I think he wants to stay on the East Coast.
So yeah, that was the clip essentially.
Do you
But
want
what
to?
do
Do
you
you
think
want
about that?
to? So I don't agree with that. Tortorella wants to move to management.
He
I
seems
would
like a
say,
coach to me, but I thought it was
yeah.
interesting.
I think I what I could see, to that point that Craig Berube comes over here this season, potentially not, to be like an assistant coach, even up top. It's not just that he's close with Tortorella. I mean, him and Keith Jones
Jones,
are
yeah.
best friends, like literally best friends. They talk every day, all day long. So, I think that's a very interesting connection. And, even to be like, hey, until you get another head coaching job, why don't you come in here? What I could see, Rocky Thompson is not having the most success on the power play. I'm not saying they're going to fire Rocky Thompson, but maybe they bring in Craig this season to be like, hey, help us fix our power play. Can
That
you,
would be
as
really
a,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I think it'd be a really smart move. And because of the relationship there, and the fact that he obviously knows this organization very well and everybody loves him here, even when he was let go, nobody was like bad mouthing Chief. Um, I think it'd be very interesting to get him in here. I don't think he's coming in here to replace John Tortorella. If we were to lose Brad Shaw or Rocky Thompson, I think he'd make an excellent assistant coach here. I don't see Tortorella going anywhere right now. This is his project. So
No, I agree. I think for
I can't see that
Tortorella,
happening at all.
yeah, like I think if we see Torts replaced, it'll be 2 to 3 years down the line.
Sure.
Not anywhere in the near future though.
Yeah. Yeah. Like after maybe he's losing the locker room.
This might be a move you make, but I don't expect Berube to be unemployed for 2 years. So
Yeah. I think they'd rather just give him a raise at this point and be like, we'll
exactly.
just give you more money to keep coaching. I think this will be Tortorella's, yeah, a good chance this will be Tortorella's last coaching job, potentially. And hopefully he does stay here to be management, to be honest with you. But I just can't see
Really
him
good hockey
leaving.
mind.
Yeah, and I don't think Craig Berube will be unemployed that long. But it is the middle of a season. There might not be coaching opportunities in plethora at this point. And I think it'd be very wise to bring him in here. And if he can, they've done it in the past where they put a coach in the skybox. They did it with Terry Murray for a while, and he had a great relationship with the Flyers. So I think that's a definite possibility. And if you look at the way the Flyers have been hiring, it is people who Keith Jones loves,
Yep.
and he loves Craig Berube. So I would
That's an
be,
interesting thing. I didn't
yeah,
really think about it from that perspective, but that's a good point, Yariv.
yeah. I love that you brought up that clip, and I didn't hear that, and I think that'd be an awesome thing to bring him in here and see if he can help us fix the power play. You know, I'm
I
sure he has
mean,
other value
at this,
beyond that, but
yeah, but at this point, I think you could try anything because it's just not working. So why not, right?
yeah, and quite frankly, he might even know, you know, something about some of these players because of his relationship with Keith Jones over the years. I don't think Keith Jones is telling him now that he took over, but prior to that, they were definitely having conversations about this team. So I
Yeah.
think he has some insight of where this team is right now, and he's not walking in blind, just focusing on St. Blues because he probably was. He probably wasn't assessing the Flyers deeply. I'd love to see him back with the Flyers in some
Yeah.
capacity, just not as head coach. I don't want to see Tortorella go anywhere at all.
Not with the way this team's playing and
No,
how they're buying into
yeah,
anything that he's doing right now. But once a flyer, always a flyer with Berube. So I would not be surprised to see him
yeah,
back.
yeah, totally. I like that. All right, the next piece of news, and this is the sad news. Former second overall pick and former Flyers prized prospect who never really got his career off the ground, retires after 5 years in the NHL, and that's not even really 5 years. He maybe had one real season in the NHL. Just a complete injury riddled career. Nolan Patrick retires after 5 years, and that's pretty sad. And I got into fights, and this is how I got ridiculed by for 45 minutes by San Filippo because I was trying to defend this kid with serious head trauma from people going after him, and then I was essentially told I'm an idiot and all this stuff, even though I didn't say anything wrong. Everything I said was accurate. I remember Russ Joy mocking me for saying he deserved a marginal increase in salary, which he got the very next year. Um, it's a shame. The kid had a lot of skill, a lot better than his numbers show. This was not an issue of talent. It was an issue that he literally his head. It
Yeah,
was
it's
one
the
injury after the
injuries.
next, and the head injury took him early. Unfortunate for him. I hope he finds his way back into the NHL as a coach, or he gets to coach somewhere or do something in hockey. I assume he will. Really sad. Really sad. Extremely promising young prospect who never really got to show it.
Yeah, it sucks for Patrick, right? Like there was a point in his career where he had 102 points in 72 games in the WHL. Brandon Wheat Kings won the Memorial Cup. Like he was a bona fide,
And he was
you
the
know,
MVP
yeah, exactly. He's a
at
bona fide,
17.
top prospect entering this league. And even in his rookie season, right? Like he had 13 goals and 30 points in 73 games. The following season, another 13 goals. Like put up 13 goals as a rookie coming in as an 18-year-old. That's really not bad.
Not bad at all.
And to end that season, I remember there was times where they had him playing with Giroux and Voracek, and he was really looking like a threat. And even in that playoff series against the Penguins, he really looked like a threat.
Yeah.
So it is really unfortunate because you could tell the skill was there, and if the injuries weren't a factor, that he probably would have been an impact player in the league.
Yep.
But it just with concussions, it's tough. And that play where he got that last concussion and McKinnon like essentially knocked him out on the ice, like just really unfortunate, dirty hit. And it just sucks that a guy with so much talent has to retire so young.
Yeah.
When he could have had years ahead of him in the NHL, but hopefully he does cement himself in hockey in some way. I do believe that he did get hired in some capacity. So he was brought on the newly founded The Power Play. So that's a hockey coaching and mentorship program founded by Jace Howerlick. And Howerlick played professionally in the past in the Czech Republic, also in the NHL for the Panthers, the Senators, and the Canucks. So reports say that the organization introduced Patrick as a retired NHL pro with significant experience. So it looks like he's going to, still be around the game in a coaching capacity. So at least that's good for him to stay around hockey in the game that he loves, after essentially having it ripped away from him at such a young age. Like it really
It's
sucks.
a shame. So much promise. The kid, look, I don't know if he was ever going to be a 100-point player in the NHL,
but he could have played in the league if he didn't have injuries.
Yeah, he would definitely projected to be like a point a game, two-way center, and with high end playmaking ability and ability to drive the net and deflect. And he's a guy we could have used today. And I think that's the only reason the Flyers traded him for Ryan Ellis, and the only reason that they accepted that trade. I don't care what people tell me. I think they knew that everything there was damaged goods. And even Phil Myers had injury problems, and you look at where his career is today. It's like these guys aren't stupid, and it was a risk for a risk, and it is what it is.
Doesn't turn out well for anybody, really. But
it turned out poorly for pretty much everybody except for
Cody Glass.
Cody Glass, right? Who also was coming back from a serious wrist injury, so it was kind of shot in the dark for all those teams. And if you look at the history, I would have rather just kept Patrick, because we wouldn't have 6.25 in LTIR right now.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. All right. Let's move on to our next topic. We'll do our Phantoms update here. Not too much I want to mention. I will say that Ole Lichel was loaned back to the Phantoms, which is really good news. I'd much rather have him playing than just sitting as a 13th forward. Rhett Gardner was called up in his place. He probably will not play a game, I assume, unless there's an injury. He is a guy with NHL experience and size, and can play a bottom six role in the NHL. So I understand why they kind of went for that. It's a guy who is risk-free to bench. Really, he's 27 years old. So not that his career is over or whatever, but, if you need to put him in as a grinder in that position, I think that's not a bad move to make. But it also shows that Wade Allison has still not played his way back into the favors of the coaches. Though he has been improving. The real update that we want to talk about. And Vasili, I'll leave the stat to you. But I just want to say that Tuamala is still absolutely crushing it. He continues to score. He had a goal and assist the other night. Andre had a goal assist the other night. And those two are leading the way as far as rookies in the AHL right now. And Andre again should have not started with the Flyers. I still stand by that. Just like I said, Airson shouldn't have started with the Flyers and should have been brought up after playing. Andre now is finally starting to get going. He has a .63 point per game. He has passed Ronnie Attard. And he had an injury even in between there in the AHL. So he's finally starting to get going. I imagine he's going to finish as one of the top defensemen in the AHL this year and potentially get a call up, but the Flyers are doing well in D, so I don't think they're rushing to call him back up. He should have just developed him in the AHL and not rushed to begin with. But really happy with Andre and Tuamala. I cannot wait for this kid to get a real shot in the NHL, and he might be somebody the Flyers are penciling in for next season because he's exceeded expectations tremendously. And I would actually say to some degrees having a better rookie season than Denoyer, maybe even Tyson Forrester to some degree, at least in the point per game department. He's looking like that was the right pick to make a few years back. And, shout out to Chuck Fletcher for making that pick, and shout out to the Flyers for not giving up on that pick because he has turned into a player that everybody was forgetting about to being one of the Flyers' most promising prospects and one that I am very eager to see play at the NHL level. And the goals that he's scoring are like top shelf rippers. Like he's not deflecting or just getting a rebound. Like he's scoring like a scorer,
Showing the skill.
and he's playing top line, and Andre's playing top pairing. I'll leave the stat to you there on Andre.
Yeah, I mean, for Tuamala, what can you say, right? Like, we always knew he had the speed and the shot, but he's really putting it together at the AHL level. 7 goals, 16 assists. He's got 23 points in 26 games. I believe he'll definitely be a candidate to potentially be an AHL All-Star, especially if he continues at that pace. So we'll see there. And just with Andre, even with an injury, right, because he was hurt a little bit to start kind of his AHL tenure this season, but he's got 11 points in 17 games, so he's even almost at a point a game right now. But I had a really interesting stat to bring up regarding Andre, just showing kind of his impact as a Phantoms defenseman so far in his young Phantoms career. So this is a stat that applies to defensemen who would have need to play 20 plus games as a minimum. But only 27 games into Emile Andre's Phantom's career so far, Andre has the highest career points per game of any Phantom's defenseman while under 22. So Andre's points per game as an under 22-year-old is at 0.63, and that's the highest amongst any Flyers or not Flyers, Phantoms defenseman. So with Andre at 0.63, Sanheim came in second, 0.57 points per game. Joni Pikkanen at 0.54 points per game. Andy Delmore, 0.53 points per game. Phil Myers, 0.52 points per game as an under 22-year-old. Eaton at 0.49 points per game, and Cam York at a 0.48 points per game as an under 22-year-old. So it just shows only 27 games in, Andre with that, points per game metric, essentially outperforming any Phantoms defenseman in history for that relative age group. So it just kind of shows his prowess offensively. And shout out to Alex Appleyard with the great stat. He's always putting up some interesting stuff we love to bring up on the podcast here.
Yeah, dude, he's definitely a great source of stats in general. So make sure you guys follow him on Twitter. I love hearing that stat, and even when you hear the name Andy Delmore, like he was a high end,
one of the best offensive defenseman in the AHL.
But like that's the thing. He was like a pure offensive defense. He was essentially a forward at D. Like he was not very good at defense. Andre is good at defense. So the fact that he's doing that and he's also a two-way defenseman, I mean, he's undersized, so he's going to take time. But if he can be even close to what Cam York is, that's a huge win for the Flyers for a second-round pick. And he's a guy who I think the Flyers are, again, we talk about moving some names out of here. He's a guy that I think, Igor Zamula, you better watch out because this kid is coming for your job right now. And Zamula's played well. I don't think Zamula's played poorly, but he's not a very physical defenseman. And Andre is more physical than him, even though he's much
And more
smaller.
offensive upside, probably.
Yeah, so that is a guy who probably will be on the bottom pairing for the Flyers next year. I find it hard to think, that he
Well,
won't be, but hopefully they make the playoffs and he gets to lead them in the playoffs.
he's progressing nicely. And I mean,
Yes, he is.
if he can at least, like you said, be what York is, but he's already out producing York while he was a Phantom. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting to see where it ends up going because everybody always thought that York would be the guy that has more offensive prowess. I think that's coming around. But I think Andre, at least the offensive side of things, and just the fact that he was a real big point producer on the power play in Sweden, I think people might underestimate his offensive game a
I
bit.
I will say shout out to Steve Cornianos, who, if you guys go way back and watch one of my early episodes with him, we talked about Andre, and he said this several times that of the other defensemen that were drafted in that time, Helge Grans being one of them, who was ranked higher than Andre. He said clear cut, he's like, Andre is the most talented of that group. He's like, he's just the smallest, and if he was 6'1",
Yeah.
6'2", like that, this is a guy who
He
should
would
have
have
been
been a first
taken.
round pick.
It would have been a
Yeah.
first round pick. In fact, he had him as a first round pick.
Well,
So again,
we know
size does
how
matter
teams
on D
are.
though. Yeah,
We know
well,
how teams are with the NHL, right?
yeah, look, size matters on D without a doubt. It's
100%.
it's just a reality. It definitely matters. But he is a guy who plays above his size. So Timo Timonen took a lot of time to develop into the defenseman he was. He was a fine wine type of player. Like when he was in his mid-20s, that's really when he started making any kind of impact at the NHL level. And then, it was really when he hit 30 is when he kind of became that upper echelon defenseman, the 28, 29, 30. And that's when he came over to the Flyers, and was like one of the best number 2 defensemen in the NHL. And when we had him in Pronger, it was like out of this world. And that's why we went to the Stanley Cup Finals. But Andre showing to have promise to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL, which is no joke. Don't ever forget, people talk about top 6 forwards like they're everything. There are 6 forwards. There are only 4 defensemen. If you are a top 4 defenseman in the NHL, you're pretty damn good. Like you're
Yeah.
a really good defenseman. So I love what I'm seeing from there. And I kind of hope that he doesn't come up to the Flyers and they let him develop. He's only 21. Let him develop the whole year with the Phantoms. The Flyers do not need him right now. Unless he grows, if he continues to skyrocket, that's a different story. But let him have a monster season. Let him build his North American game. Hopefully the Phantoms make the playoffs. Let him get Phantoms playoffs experience. That would be huge for a guy like him. And obviously Tuomala as well. And
Yeah.
I'm loving the European.
The Finnish-Swedish connection,
Yeah.
and you have 2 second-round picks there, playing well for the Flyers. So
Funny how player development all of a sudden has changed here. Imagine if Nolan Patrick. I was thinking about what we were talking about. Imagine if Patrick was here when Tortorella was coach. And obviously,
I think that would have been good for him. And
oh
also,
my God,
I mean, the
I would have
development
loved
staff,
Patrick too.
the development staff's obviously improved with just Briere and the changes they've made. So it's unfortunate because I think there was things lacking in that
Shows how
prior
much
regime.
leadership. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I think things were lacking in that prior regime. But yeah, just to finish off what you were saying, like it shows how much leadership has an effect, like we've said it before, in a top-down manner. How, if you don't believe your bosses or who you're working for and you don't see the vision, it's kind of hard to buy into it sometimes. So
Yeah. And remember how Gossesbear was treated here. And he's, again, people called him garbage.
doing well in Detroit.
Yeah, did well in Arizona too. People are pretending like what he's doing in Detroit is like new. He was doing the same shit in Arizona.
Yeah, exactly.
Like people are taking away from players. And another guy that everybody loves to ride on, Ivan Provorov, has the same amount of points this season as almost his points and plus minus is identical to Travis Sanheim now, who's having a fantastic year. So just want to put that in perspective to people that like people think that we throw away garbage here. Doesn't work that way. And that team is struggling. I can only imagine how Provorov will be playing under the way this team's playing right now. Not that I regret the trade. It is what it is. We got the right assets. We got other good players here. Peterson's not, he's a potential buyout candidate, but outside of that, the trade was good. Helge Grans is injured, but it's a prospect.
I think
We got a
that's one
first round
that
pick, and Sean Walker looks great.
I think it's one that works for all parties there.
Yeah,
Obviously.
yeah. I think it was just a fair trade. It was just a solid trade all around, and the Flyers at least got value for the guy. But it's a shame, you know. It's like this is why I talk about it all the time. You want to see what things are like when things are going well. That's how you really know what to upgrade. When everything is going like shit, you can pick on individual players, but you can pick on a ton.
Yeah, it's all going bad, right? Exactly.
Right.
So it's
So
hard
how
to
do you
really
pick on one
assess.
guy? Right.
Yeah.
That's why it was easier last year because a lot of guys were breaking out and you could literally pick on Kevin Hayes because you're like, hey, these young guys are playing pretty well and you're not.
And he stinks. Yeah.
You know, he wasn't playing very well for all the points that he got and the all-star appearance. Like none of us went like, oh yeah, he should be an all-star. We're all like,
Konechny should be the all-star.
yeah.
But
He didn't play very well. He was getting
no.
like he had some moments, but like in between 5-on-5, I completely agreed with Torts. I didn't like his game at
Yeah.
all. I only liked his game his first year here, and after that, his game frustrated me. All right, let's get into our last segment. It's just prospects. Just first thing we talked about, Denver Barkey didn't make Team Canada, but in his first game back, he had 3 assists. Love to see that. It shows the kid's attitude. I'm still really high on him, and I think he's going to be a late bloomer regardless. But this is a guy that like I think is going to be absolute steal in the draft, and I think even next year people are going to be like, "Oh, can he make the Flyers?" I would not be surprised if we're having that conversation. I don't think they will. I don't think they're trying to rush him, and they're again we kind of are overloaded. But I would not be surprised at all if he gets a very long look at in training camp next year. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Flyers try to bring him over to the AHL sooner rather than later and get him playing against men because he's already taken another jump. He's already way above a point per game for his respective team. There's no reason to rush him, but you know the kid's good. He's really good, and he's got that Travis Konechny vibe to me. I don't think he'll be the same type of goal scorer.
Smaller player, but
Yeah, but he can play center too.
yeah, he can play every position.
Not that much smaller than TK. He is
He,
smaller, but
he can play every position, Barkey, which is interesting. I mean, and that's kind of a benefit. But yeah, like just tenacity, the forechecking. But yeah, 3 assists going back after not making camp. I mean, that's a good sign. Obviously, not letting him, like letting that affect him there. But he played well in the showcase camp, so it sucks that he didn't make the team. But I think for a player like him and the way the World Junior Championship usually works, especially for Team Canada, is they usually go for second um, year players coming back. So like a lot of guys who made the team last year that are still eligible are making the team this year. That
yeah.
kind of pushes him out. And they all obviously have the option to bring Poitras in from Boston. So of course you're going to pick a guy who's in the NHL over a guy who's in the OHL.
And
I
he's
mean,
also undersized.
yeah. So it makes a lot of sense, but I
Can't
think
play in
it's
the bottom
a
six.
it's a chip on the shoulder for him for next season to make the World Juniors for Canada. So
You know, it's interesting. I'm actually thinking about when Travis Konechny played for the World Junior Championships, and he outplayed a lot of his teammates, and they just kept using him in a bottom six role, and refused to elevate him. And it shows that there's like kind of a bias against these guys a little bit. And I think again, a lot of people here, I'm going to leave names out of it, but told you that Travis Konechny was fully developed at 24 years
yeah,
old.
but he was never going to score more than 30 goals
Right.
and all
Yeah.
that when he's
Yeah.
on
I
pace for
still,
like 50 right now. But
I was gonna, yeah, and that's without a top playmaking player to play with. Like I can only imagine how many points he put up with if he was playing with like a Claude Giroux level guy.
yeah,
Um, and we'll see. You know, he might be Mitchkov's line mate. He might be, he might be that. It might be Mitchkov, Couturier, and DK at one point. Who
possible.
knows?
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
interesting to see that for sure.
yeah. Um, yeah, next guy, Oliver Bonk. So just a reminder that he did make Team Canada. And I just wanted to bring this up. So right now he is playing second pairing with Jake Furlong. And I want to bring it up because if I look at the Daily Wire's projection lineup, they had him as the number 5-6 guy playing on his left hand side, which okay. And I just want to I think he's underrated. You know, I think he's going to be a lot better than people anticipate. And again, shout out to Steve Cornianos who said, "Hey, this guy's got top pairing potential."
Yeah,
And judging where he is on a always very deep Canadian squad, being in a top four position there, I think is a really good sign at such a young age. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does fantastic in this tournament. Seems like they're going to rely heavily upon him if he's in the top four.
I think there is a bit of him being underrated just for the fact that he's more like defensive first. Like there wasn't as much offense and offensive pop to his game, but he's
Until
been showing that.
recently.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just saying in terms of the draft season,
Yeah,
right? Like
no,
heading into the
100%.
draft. But this season, he's obviously showing a lot more offense. And I think that, factors into Team Canada selecting him too. But I mean, to play a top four role on the World Junior team, it obviously shows that they have faith in his skill set. Also, something to note is he was on the first power play unit too for them, actually, when they were practicing. So I know for everybody saying he's not offensive, for Canada put him on that top power play unit, it obviously shows that they think that he can help on the power play and help run the power play. So that'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if he remains on that top unit for them. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about Bonk. We'll see him and Barkey. I love those draft picks. So,
Yeah, really smart
um,
picks, and
yeah,
you kind of see what the Flyers are aiming for with them,
it,
obviously.
Bonk would be a great guy to play with Travis Sanheim, even though Sanheim's a right side
Yeah.
defender now.
Maybe
But
then you switch back at that
yeah,
point, but
or maybe Bonk is the one that ends up playing with York in the future. Who knows?
yeah, it'll be
But
interesting.
yeah, he'll be a very complimentary. All right. The last one is Mitch Cobb. Now he hasn't played in a little bit. He didn't play in the All Star game because he had pneumonia.
Still
He had,
dealing with that, I think. So
yeah, so I'm sure he'll be back. But I was just looking at like Nikita Kucherov, who is leading the league in points per game right now easily.
in
He's got 20
points too. Nobody ever talks about him though, but
points, goals, got 22 goals right now. He's just lighting it up. And I was just looking at his numbers,
54
and
points. Yeah.
they're so strikingly similar to Michkov's in the MHL. And he didn't produce like Michkov in the KHL. Now, I don't know if that was because of minutes played, because of the KHL being the way it is. But it just adds more excitement to the Michkov thing for me. When you look at a guy like Nikita Kucherov and what he's able to do at the NHL level, I just can't help but think like that's what we're getting in Michkov. We're getting this 100-point guy who's going to come to the NHL, probably put up 80 points in the early part of his career, and then slowly evolve into a 100-point player in the NHL. Maybe slow, maybe immediate. I don't know. But I look at that track and I look at what Nikita Kucherov does on a good team. Again, that does matter that you're on a good team. And, when Mishkov comes here, and theoretically we will be good by then, especially in the way we're projecting right now. You're talking about another Kucherov like type of player on the Flyers. And obviously Panarin's another comparison, and he's sick, and then Kaprizov,
Kaprizov.
and
Yeah.
he's sick. Just having a prospect of that caliber, when you watch a guy like Kucherov, and this is not the first time he's been in the mix for, the Hart Trophy, um, or the Art Ross, sorry. Uh, it's severely impressive. And one, people should pay attention to Kucherov. Two, again, I think that's what we're looking at. Mitch Cobb, their numbers are strikingly similar in the MHL at a similar age. So they're both scoring a goal a game
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
that
and
league.
I mean it's crazy, right? Like we brought it up before on the show how Michkov's basically outpacing like every Russian, generational superstar elite talent that
That's
you've
the
seen
crazy
come in
part.
the NHL like over the last 20 years essentially. So, it just shows that if he's outpacing all of them and they've had such impact to the NHL level, what will Michkov be able to do, right? Obviously, maybe you can argue that the KHL isn't as strong now as it was when those guys were in the league. That's valid, but he's out not even it's not like he's outpacing them by like a point 1 point per game or like a couple assists. Like it's a considerable margin. So even if that's
Yes.
the case, like it's pretty equal, it's pretty similar that he probably is on the skill set of guys that are like elite talents for several seasons, like a Kucherov, like a Buchnevich, like a Kaprizov, like a Panarin, like an Ovechkin. So see the kid be at that level. I think it's just something that the Flyers haven't seen for a long time in terms of prospect, being generational potential talent. So something to be excited about. And just to finish off with Kucherov, like, yeah, like it's crazy that he has 54 points and all anybody ever talks about is McDavid, McKinnon, Pasternak. Nobody ever
Jack
mentions
Hughes,
Kucherov, Jack Hughes, but
because he's
yeah,
Russian.
I know, which is it sucks to
There's
say,
a
but
there's a clear Russian bias in this league.
for sure, Kucherov should
Clear.
definitely get more love for what he's doing this year. I
And I
think.
imagine he will if he continues doing what he's doing. It'll be undeniable at that point. And the same thing with Michkov. Like again, people question Michkov and go, oh, we don't know, but why didn't you question Bedard then? And he's crushing it, by the way. He's on an 80-point season, which
did anybody not expect that? Like,
right,
come
but
on.
that's the generational mark. When I see a guy come into the league in the modern era and put up 80 point per game in his rookie year, just like McDavid, just
like Crosby, like
Crosby,
Ovechkin. Yeah.
right? Like that's what we're talking about here. I think Michkov, he's not coming in as an 18-year-old. You know, hopefully he comes in as a 20-year-old and not 21. But you know, he's 19 right now, and hopefully he comes early. But he's going to be, you know, if he comes in at 21 years old,
those extra years will only help the production.
He's coming in as a 100-point player.
Well, he's coming in more mature. You know,
there's a good chance.
Probably
if the team is good.
He's coming in more mature. The games were developed, and then he's just going to be stronger. So he's going to be able to fend off NHL defenders better.
Yeah, he's a thick kid.
Yeah,
he's
that'll
not
result,
like a scrawny 5'11".
Well, yeah, that'll result in just more goals and more goal scoring, right?
I would say he's thicker than Bedard. Like at the same age, like he's
that's close. I mean, Bedard, I don't know. Bedard, if you see his fucking quads, he's like
true.
Another level. So it might be
I'm not knocking Bedard. I love that kid. I wish we would have got him, but the
I still don't get how Chicago got him.
Yeah,
but sure.
I would still be interested to see if Michkov could be a center. I might be the only one in that position, but
no, I'm interested in that. I feel like if you're going to play at a point per game pace in the KHL as a center in the preseason, I mean, who knows what could happen? He definitely has
bad defensively.
He definitely has the smarts to do it. It's just, does putting him in that position take away from his offense potentially? Yeah. Like it didn't look like it did in the preseason, but like who knows down the line. So that's something you might sacrifice, but who knows? But it'll be interesting. Like that's obviously, I think everybody, and I probably speak for all Flyers fans and, you know, Flyers media and just NHL media pundits in general, that everybody's excited to see what Michkov can do at the NHL level and what kind of skill he's going to kind of show here. So,
yeah. All right, let's end it on that. Again, thank you all. Vasili, anything to leave our audience with?
I recently had a article come out just detailing kind of Cam York's rise to being a top pair option for the Flyers. So that came out yesterday. So please give that a read on flyersnittygritty.com, and please give all the content and written content on there a read, because our writers do a great job and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, definitely make sure to read that. Again, I'm sure it's more in depth than what we said about York on this podcast. All right. Thank you again for everybody for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, follow us on iTunes, follow us on Spotify, go read our stuff on the site, follow Jamie, follow myself, follow Vasili, follow Rob. And again, we really appreciate everything you guys have done for us and all the listening. And I hope we're filling that value for you guys. I think we're a little bit different than every other podcast, and I think we say things differently, and I think it's something that Philly needs to hear instead of the same stuff that everybody else repeats to each other. Again, we love you guys. You are the best, and remember, always stay pretty.